I am Barry, 32 years old, and known for speaking my mind in a workplace where silence is the norm. For 6 months, I watched a predator operate with complete immunity. Small comments became unwanted touches, which evolved into cornering women when alone. Everyone knew, but no one spoke up. Why? Because Trevor was untouchable as the VP's nephew. Until the day he targeted our new intern, and something in me snapped. If you're watching this, let me know where you're viewing from. Hit subscribe and like if you've ever witnessed injustice at work. Stay with me to hear what happened when I finally confronted him. Ridgeway Marketing wasn't just any workplace in Chicago. It was the kind of gleaming skyscraper office you see in movies with floor-to-ceiling windows, showcasing breathtaking views of Lake Michigan. The kind of place that impresses clients and makes your parents proud when you tell them where you work. That prestige was precisely what attracted me 5 years ago when I joined as a junior marketing strategist. I worked my way up the traditional way. Late nights poring over campaign metrics, weekends sacrificed to meet impossible deadlines, holidays spent answering client emails instead of celebrating with family. My hard work paid off when I was promoted to marketing manager 2 years ago, becoming one of the youngest women to hold the position at 30. I was proud of my accomplishments, believing I had earned my seat at the table through merit and determination. How naive I was. The first time I met Amanda from HR, she seemed pleasant enough. She had this perpetual half-smile that never quite reached her eyes, always dressed in sensible pantsuits with minimal jewelry. Over time, I realized that smile was a mask she wore while delivering disappointing news or sidestepping difficult conversations. She was a master of corporate doublespeak, using phrases like "we'll look into it" and "I understand your concerns," without ever taking meaningful action. Jeffrey Parker, our vice president of client services, was the kind of executive who commanded a room without trying. Tall, always impeccably dressed in custom suits with a full head of silver hair that he wore like a crown. He'd been with the company for 25 years and had connections with every major client. The company president relied on him heavily, which gave Jeffrey nearly unlimited power. His office on the executive floor might as well have had a moat around it for how inaccessible he was to regular employees. Then there was Trevor Parker, Jeffrey's nephew. Trevor arrived about 9 months ago, stepping into the newly created role of Director of Client Relations. He was 35, with the kind of conventional good looks that helped smooth over his complete lack of qualifications. Dark hair, always perfectly styled, expensive watches rotating on his wrist each week, and a smile that disappeared the moment clients or executives left the room. Despite having virtually no marketing experience, he was immediately placed above several veteran employees, including women who had been with the company for over a decade. Rachel became my closest ally at Ridgeway, within weeks of my starting there. She was the senior copywriter, brilliant with words and office politics alike. With curly auburn hair and always sporting some vintage-inspired outfit, Rachel was the one who first warned me about the company's unwritten rules. "This place operates on a very specific hierarchy," she told me during one of our lunch breaks, "and it has nothing to do with the organizational chart." Michael from the design department was one of the few male colleagues who seemed genuinely oblivious to the politics. He was quiet, focused on his work, and treated everyone with the same respectful attention regardless of their gender or position. The culture at Ridgeway was carefully crafted to appear progressive while maintaining old-school power dynamics. The website showcased diversity statistics and featured women prominently in marketing materials. The company sponsored women in business events and made public commitments to gender equality. But behind closed doors, it was a different story. In my first year, I witnessed countless subtle acts of sexism that were easily dismissed individually, but formed a pattern when viewed collectively. Women's ideas being repeated by men who received the credit. Female employees being described as emotional when they were merely being assertive. The expectation that women would take notes in meetings, order lunch, or plan office celebrations regardless of their role. The executive floor was almost exclusively male, with the lone exception of Patricia in finance, who had been with the company for 30 years and was regarded as one of the boys. The decision-makers gathered for golf outings and whiskey tastings, where major decisions were informally made, before ever reaching an official meeting. Women were technically invited to company happy hours, but rarely to the after-party where the real networking happened. When Trevor first arrived, I didn't immediately recognize the danger. His early interactions with me were professional enough, though there was something in his gaze that lingered uncomfortably. I dismissed it as my imagination, or perhaps his awkwardness at being new. Rachel noticed my interaction with him at the company holiday party and pulled me aside. "Be careful around Trevor," she whispered, glancing around to ensure no one could hear. "He's not just any new hire. He's Jeffrey's golden boy, completely untouchable." "What do you mean?" I asked, watching Trevor charm a group of executives across the room. Rachel sighed. "Jeffrey has been trying to get Trevor hired here for years. The previous president always refused, because the kid has zero qualifications. But our new president wants to keep Jeffrey happy, so..." She made a gesture suggesting Trevor had been installed without question. "But if he's unqualified, won't that become obvious?" I asked. "It doesn't matter," Rachel said flatly. "The point is to give him the title and the salary. The rest of us will do the actual work while he takes the credit. That's how it works here for the chosen ones." I nodded slowly, thinking this was just another case of nepotism I could work around. I had no idea that Trevor's presence would evolve into something far more sinister than mere incompetence. I still believed that hard work and results would speak for themselves, that merit mattered more than connections, that the company would protect all its employees equally. I was wrong on every count. The first time I noticed something truly off about Trevor was during a department meeting in my 7th month at Ridgeway. We were discussing a new campaign for a fitness client, and Danielle from account management was presenting her research findings. Trevor interrupted her repeatedly, each time placing his hand on her shoulder or upper arm. Each touch lasted a few seconds too long, and I could see Danielle growing increasingly uncomfortable, her voice becoming strained as she tried to maintain her composure. After the meeting, I caught up with Danielle at the coffee station. "Are you okay?" "That seemed pretty uncomfortable in there," I said quietly. She glanced around before responding. "It's fine. I'm fine," she said unconvincingly. "That's just how Trevor is. You get used to it." But over the next few weeks, I began noticing Trevor's behavior wasn't limited to Danielle. In creative brainstorming sessions, he would stand unnecessarily close to women, leaning over them to look at their notes. During presentations, he would make comments about women's appearances disguised as compliments. "That color really brings out your eyes," "Alicia," or "That dress is very flattering on you, Kate." His tactics were insidious and calculated. He would touch women in ways that could be dismissed as accidental or friendly if challenged. A hand on the small of a back when passing in the hallway, fingers brushing against a woman's hand when reaching for a document, standing too close in the elevator. Each interaction brief enough to seem innocent in isolation, but forming a disturbing pattern when viewed collectively. Most women responded with uncomfortable laughter or by physically creating distance without directly addressing his behavior. Some would ensure they were never alone with him, traveling in pairs to meetings or waiting for others before entering the conference room. Others developed elaborate routes around the office to avoid passing his desk. These survival tactics were so commonplace, they became normalized, with women warning each new female hire about Trevor within days of their arrival. The incident with Jessica in the copy room happened about 3 months after Trevor started. I had gone to make copies of a contract when I heard Trevor's voice from inside the small room, followed by Jessica's nervous laughter. When I entered, Jessica was backed against the copier, Trevor standing much too close with one arm propped against the machine, effectively trapping her. He stepped away casually when he saw me making some joke about just getting to know the team better before leaving. Jessica's hands were visibly shaking as she gathered her papers. "Jessica," I started. "Please don't," she said, her voice barely audible. "I need this job. I have student loans and my mom's medical bills." Tears welled in her eyes. "He didn't actually do anything. I can't prove anything." Later that day, I found Rachel in the break room and told her what I'd seen. "It's not the first time," she said grimly. "Sarah from accounting had a similar experience last month, and Diana from legal the week before that." "Has anyone reported him?" I asked. Rachel gave me a look that made me feel incredibly naive. To who exactly? Amanda in HR reports directly to Jeffrey, and Jeffrey would never believe anything negative about his precious nephew. But there are policies against harassment, I insisted. The company has a whole section about it in the employee handbook. Policies protect the company, not the employees, Rachel said, stirring her coffee absently. Besides, Trevor is careful. He makes sure there are no witnesses to anything that crosses the line into clearly actionable harassment. It would be one woman's word against his, and guess who the company would believe? This can't be right, I said, frustration building. There has to be something we can do. Look, Barry. Rachel leaned closer, her voice dropping. Trevor is untouchable. Jeffrey got him this job, and Jeffrey essentially runs this company. The best advice I can give you is to keep your distance and your head down. Don't become a target. Despite Rachel's warning, I couldn't just stand by. During our next team meeting, Trevor made a suggestive comment about Stephanie's presentation skills. I spoke up immediately. I think we should focus on Stephanie's excellent data analysis rather than her presentation style, I said, firmly making direct eye contact with Trevor. The room fell silent. Trevor's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened. Of course, he said smoothly. I was merely complimenting her confidence. Wouldn't want anyone to misinterpret friendly feedback, would we, Barry? There was a subtle threat in his tone that wasn't lost on anyone in the room. After the meeting, Rachel cornered me in the hallway. What are you doing? She hissed. Don't put yourself on his radar. Someone has to say something, I insisted. And what did that accomplish? You embarrassed him for 5 seconds, and now he's going to make you a target. The company protects men like Trevor. Always has, always will. Walking back to my desk, I felt a sinking realization that Rachel was right. The company had structures in place that inherently protected powerful men while leaving women vulnerable. The harassment policies were just words on paper with no real enforcement mechanism. The power dynamic was so deeply entrenched that even attempting to address it directly seemed futile. But I couldn't shake the image of Jessica trapped against that copy machine, the fear in her eyes, or the resignation in Rachel's voice. Something needed to change, but I had no idea yet how to make that happen, or what it might cost me to try. Over the next 6 months, Trevor's behavior escalated from inappropriate comments to increasingly bold physical violations of women's personal space. The office became a minefield of tense interactions and whispered warnings. Women began taking roundabout paths to avoid walking past his office. Bathroom breaks became buddy systems to ensure no one was ever alone in certain parts of the building. Laura from the analytics team experienced one of the more public incidents during her quarterly presentation to the executive team. She was discussing conversion metrics when Trevor approached to help advance the slides. Instead of using the remote or standing at a reasonable distance, he stood directly behind her, his chest practically touching her back, reaching around her to point at the screen. I watched Laura freeze mid-sentence, her professional demeanor cracking, as she tried to maintain composure while being essentially trapped between Trevor and the presentation screen. Afterward, when I checked on her in the women's restroom, she was splashing cold water on her flushed face. "Are you okay?" I asked gently. "What choice do I have?" she responded, her voice bitter. "If I make a scene, I'm labeled difficult. If I report it, nothing happens except I get passed over for opportunities. If I quit, I'm letting him win and hurting my career." The incident with Stephanie was different but equally disturbing. During a campaign planning meeting, she presented a comprehensive strategy for a new client. Trevor dismissed her ideas publicly, making her seem unprepared. The following week, he presented the exact same strategy to the client, almost verbatim, taking full credit. When Stephanie attempted to speak up, Trevor interrupted. "Stephanie seems confused," he said with a condescending smile. "This approach incorporates elements from various team members but differs significantly from her initial suggestion." I watched Stephanie's face fall as the client praised Trevor's innovative thinking. After the meeting, she confided in me that this wasn't the first time he had stolen her work. "But what can I do?" she asked, resigned. "It's his word against mine, and he's Jeffrey's nephew." The situation with Diana was more private but perhaps more sinister. After a company happy hour, several of us witnessed Trevor cornering her in a booth, his arms stretched across the back of the seat, effectively blocking her exit. From across the room, it might have looked like a casual conversation, but Diana's body language told a different story. Her shoulders were hunched, her gaze fixed on her drink, leaning as far away from him as the booth would allow. I interrupted by asking Diana to help me order drinks, giving her an escape route. Once at the bar, she thanked me profusely. He was suggesting we continue the evening at his place, she whispered, hands shaking slightly as she gripped her glass. When I said no, he mentioned how he and his uncle were discussing which junior associates showed long-term potential at the firm. The implied threat was clear: accommodate his advances, or risk your career. It was textbook quid pro quo harassment, but still delivered with enough subtlety to maintain plausible deniability. My first direct confrontation with Trevor happened after Diana's incident. I found him alone in the break room the next morning. "What you did to Diana last night was inappropriate," I said without preamble. Trevor's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. "I'm not sure what you mean. Diana and I were having a friendly conversation. Is workplace socialization forbidden now?" "You know exactly what I mean," I replied, keeping my voice steady. The unwanted touching, the cornering, the implied threats about her career. His friendly facade dropped for a brief moment, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. "That's a serious accusation, Barry," he said, voice low. "One that could be considered defamatory without evidence. I'd be careful about spreading rumors that could damage my reputation or impact your future here." "Is that a threat?" I asked. "Not at all," he smiled, the mask back in place. "Just friendly advice from a concerned colleague. We're all on the same team here, aren't we?" After this exchange, I decided to take more formal action and requested a meeting with Amanda from HR. Her office was meticulously organized with inspirational quotes about teamwork framed on the walls, a stark contrast to the conversation we were about to have. "I'm concerned about a pattern of behavior from Trevor Parker." I began laying out specific incidents I had witnessed or that had been reported to me. Amanda listened, taking notes and nodding sympathetically. When I finished, she sighed and closed her notebook. "I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, Barry," she said in her carefully modulated HR voice. "These are concerning allegations, but they're also very difficult to verify. Do you have any documentation, emails, recordings, written statements from the women involved?" "Most of it happens in person," I explained. "And the women are afraid to come forward formally because they fear retaliation. Without concrete evidence or formal complaints from the affected individuals, there's very little action I can take," Amanda said. "It becomes a matter of hearsay, which puts the company in a difficult position legally." "So Trevor just gets to continue harassing women because he's careful about not leaving evidence?" I asked incredulously. Amanda's expression tightened slightly. "That's not what I'm saying. I'm explaining the reality of workplace investigations. We need more than secondhand accounts to take disciplinary action, especially against someone in a director-level position." I left that meeting with a clear understanding that official channels would provide no immediate solution. The system was designed to protect the company, and by extension those in power. If I wanted to create change, I would need irrefutable evidence. I began documenting everything meticulously. Dates, times, locations, witnesses, exact quotes. I kept the information in a password-protected document updated daily. I encouraged other women to do the same, creating an informal support network. We began strategically ensuring that Trevor was never alone with any woman in the office, using a text alert system to warn each other of his whereabouts. As women increasingly came to me with their experiences, I became known as an unofficial advocate. This role didn't go unnoticed by Trevor. He began excluding me from important meetings, assigning me less desirable projects, and subtly undermining my contributions in group settings. The message was clear: continue pushing, and watch your career suffer. Despite the mounting personal risk, I couldn't bring myself to stop. Each news story strengthened my resolve. Each tearful confession in the bathroom, or whispered warning in the break room, made me more determined to end the cycle. I knew I might lose my job, but the alternative, doing nothing while the abuse continued, had become unthinkable. Sophia arrived on a Tuesday morning in early May, 22 years old and fresh out of college. With long dark hair and wide, eager eyes, she radiated enthusiasm and ambition. As our new marketing intern, she would be rotating through departments for the next 3 months, learning different aspects of the business. During her introduction in our morning meeting, I noticed Trevor's gaze fixate on her with an intensity that made my stomach clench. I had seen that look before, the predatory assessment, the slight smile that never reached his eyes. Sophia, oblivious to the danger, smiled brightly as she shared her background in digital marketing and her excitement about joining Ridgeway. After the meeting, I made a point to approach her. "Welcome to the team," I said warmly. "I'm Barry, the marketing manager. If you need anything or have any questions, my desk is right over there." "Thank you so much," Sophia replied. "Everyone seems so nice here." I was nervous, but Mr. Parker already offered to mentor me personally. He said I have real potential. The warning bells in my mind became sirens. "Mr. Parker, senior or junior?" I asked carefully. "Oh, Trevor," she clarified. "He said since I'm interested in client relations, he could show me the ropes." I kept my expression neutral while internally panicking. That's thoughtful of him. Still, my door is always open if you need anything. Anything at all. Over the next few days, I observed Trevor finding excuses to be near Sophia, offering unnecessary help with simple tasks, complimenting her outfits, standing too close during conversations. It was his familiar pattern, but accelerated, as though emboldened by her youth and inexperience. I invited Sophia to lunch that Thursday, hoping to subtly warn her without scaring her or making her feel uncomfortable at her new workplace. "How's your first week going?" I asked, once we were settled at a cafe across the street. "It's amazing," she gushed. "The work is fascinating, and everyone's been so helpful, especially Trevor. He's taking me to meet the Bluestone client tomorrow. He said it's unusual for interns to attend client meetings, but he thinks I could learn a lot." My heart sank. A client meeting meant travel time, alone in a car, potentially drinks afterward, all the scenarios Trevor had exploited before. "Sophia," I began carefully, "I don't want to alarm you, but I think you should be aware that Trevor has a reputation in the office." Her smile faltered slightly. "What kind of reputation?" "He can be very friendly with female employees in ways that sometimes cross professional boundaries," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Several women have had uncomfortable experiences with him." Sophia's expression shifted from confusion to disappointment. "Oh," she said quietly. "I thought he was being nice because he saw my potential. You think it's just because—" She didn't finish the sentence. "Your work is excellent," I assured her quickly. "Your portfolio impressed everyone. I just want you to be careful and trust your instincts. If anything ever makes you uncomfortable, please come talk to me." She nodded, but I could see the conflict in her eyes, the desire to believe in her own professional worth, battling against the ugly reality I had just introduced. That afternoon, I was finishing a report when I saw Trevor follow Sophia toward the supply closet at the end of our floor. The supply closet was notorious for its awkward location, in a low-traffic hallway. I waited 30 seconds, then followed, pretending I needed printer paper. As I approached, I heard Sophia's voice pitched higher than normal. "I should get back to my desk. Lindsay is expecting these folders." Trevor's reply was low, inaudible from where I stood. I rounded the corner to find Sophia backed against the supply shelves, Trevor's arm propped against the shelf above her head, effectively caging her in. Her face was flushed, eyes wide with discomfort. "Oh, good, you found the folders," I said loudly, causing Trevor to step back immediately. "Lindsay was just asking me where you were, Sophia. I'll help you carry these back." Trevor's smile was tight, eyes cold. "Just showing our new intern where everything is kept," he said smoothly. "How helpful," I replied, my tone making it clear I wasn't fooled. "I can take it from here." Once we were safely away, Sophia's composure crumbled. He said he wanted to show me something in the supply closet, but then he was asking if I had a boyfriend and saying how he could make or break my experience here, she whispered, tears threatening. When I tried to leave, he moved closer and said he could put in a good word for a permanent position if we got to know each other better. My blood boiled, but I maintained a calm exterior for Sophia's sake. You did nothing wrong, I assured her. This is entirely on him and it's completely unacceptable. Would you be willing to report this to HR? Fear flashed across her face. I can't, she said quickly. It's my first week, and it would be my word against his. What if no one believes me? I need this internship for credit and the recommendation for graduate school. Her words echoed what I'd heard from so many women before her. The same impossible calculation between personal safety and professional survival. The same fear that speaking up would cost them everything, while the harasser faced no consequences. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a fog of anger, reviewing every incident, every tearful confidence, every time the system had failed the women at Ridgeway. When I overheard Trevor, in the break room later that day, speaking to Brian from sales, my tenuous control finally snapped. The new intern is something else, Trevor was saying, voice low but not low enough. Fresh meat, you know. So naive it's almost too easy. Brian laughed uncomfortably. Man, you're something else. What can I say? I have a way with the ladies, Trevor replied, smirking. Perks of the position. In that moment, something crystallized within me. The consequences to my career, the potential fallout, none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was that if no one stopped him, Trevor would continue this behavior indefinitely, harming woman after woman, while the company looked the other way. My heart pounded as I made my decision. For 6 months I had tried to work within the system. I had documented incidents reported to HR, warned women, created support networks, all while watching the harassment continue unabated. Conventional methods had failed. It was time for a different approach. I knew confronting Trevor publicly carried enormous risk. I could lose my job, my professional reputation, my financial security. But in that moment, watching him laugh about targeting a 22-year-old intern, the potential cost seemed insignificant compared to the cost of remaining silent. The break room was crowded for a Friday afternoon. About 15 people occupied the space, some clustered around tables eating lunch, others waiting by the microwaves or coffee machine. The room fell into a momentary lull in conversation. As I pushed through the door, my heart hammering against my ribs, but my resolve unwavering. Trevor stood by the counter, stirring creamer into his coffee, chatting with 2 male colleagues from sales. His posture was relaxed, confident, the stance of someone who had never faced consequences for his actions. He glanced up as I entered, giving me the same dismissive look he'd been perfecting since our previous confrontation. The break room was arranged in an open plan with the coffee station along one wall, several round tables in the center, and a row of vending machines along the opposite wall. As I walked directly toward Trevor, conversations quieted the instinctive human response to sensing impending conflict. I stopped about 3 feet from him, close enough to ensure he couldn't dismiss me, but maintaining enough distance to feel safe. My hands were trembling slightly, but I kept them at my sides, standing tall. Trevor, we need to talk about your behavior, I said, my voice steadier than I expected, cutting through the hushed room. His expression flickered between surprise and annoyance before settling on amused condescension. This seems like an inappropriate venue for whatever this is. Barry, he replied, glancing around at our audience. Actually, I think it's perfect. I continued, maintaining eye contact. For 6 months, I've watched you harass women in this office. I've documented every incident. The room had gone completely silent now. I could feel every eye on us, the collective breath being held. On January 12th, you cornered Jessica in the copy room. February 3rd, you repeatedly touched Laura during her presentation. March 10th, you stole Stephanie's campaign ideas, and then gaslit her when she called you on it. April 2nd, you threatened Diana's position when she refused to go home with you after the company happy hour. With each example, Trevor's smug expression hardened, his knuckles whitening around his coffee cup. And today, I continued, my voice growing stronger. You trapped our new intern in the supply closet and implied her future here depends on her getting to know you better. Then you had the audacity to brag about it, calling her fresh meat. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Trevor's face flushed with anger. These are serious allegations, he snapped, attempting to regain control, and completely unfounded. You're creating a hostile work environment with these false accusations. They aren't false, and you know it, I replied calmly. I have dates, times, witnesses, and statements. I've kept a journal of every incident reported to me. 14 women, Trevor. 14 women in this office who have been subjected to your inappropriate behavior. This is slander, he hissed, stepping toward me aggressively. I held my ground, though my heart raced. You're going to regret this little performance. No, what I regret is not doing this sooner, I said. What I regret is watching woman after woman suffer while you faced zero consequences because of who your uncle is. At the mention of his uncle, Trevor's expression darkened further. You have no idea who you're messing with, he threatened, voice low. One call to Jeffrey and your career is over, not just here but in this entire industry. Though my knees felt weak and my stomach churned with anxiety, I maintained my composure. Go ahead, make that call. Explain to him why 14 women are ready to come forward. Explain the liability you've created for this company. Explain how you've been using his name and position to threaten and harass women. Trevor looked around, suddenly aware of his audience, many of whom were women he had targeted in the past. The room had transformed from a neutral space to what must have felt like hostile territory for him. A few people had their phones out, though whether they were texting or recording I couldn't tell. This is ridiculous, he sputtered, setting down his coffee, so forcefully that it sloshed over the rim. I don't have to listen to this. You're clearly unstable and jealous of my position. As he attempted to push past me toward the door, I stood firm. Every woman in this office deserves to feel safe at work, I said, projecting my voice to ensure everyone heard. Your behavior has created a hostile environment that violates company policy and potentially the law. It stops now. Trevor glared at me, his facade of professional charm completely evaporated. You're finished here, he said flatly. My uncle will hear about this immediately. I'm counting on it, I replied. He stormed out of the break room, nearly colliding with Rachel, who was entering. She looked from his retreating form to me, standing in the center of the silent room. For a moment after Trevor left, no one spoke. Then slowly conversations resumed in hushed tones. Several women approached me, some teary-eyed, others with expressions of mingled fear and relief. Thank you, Diana whispered, squeezing my arm briefly before returning to her desk. Others were more cautious. You know he's going straight to Jeffrey, right? Said Mark from accounting. This could get ugly. Rachel pushed through the small crowd that had gathered around me. What happened? She demanded, eyes wide with concern. Before I could answer, Amanda from HR appeared at the break room entrance, her expression grave. Barry, can I see you in my office, please? As I followed her through the maze of cubicles, I could feel the weight of stares tracking our progress. Some supportive, others curious, a few disapproving. My professional future hung in the balance, but strangely I felt calmer than I had in months. Whatever happened next, I had broken the silence. I had named the behavior that everyone had pretended not to see. I had stood up not just for myself, but for every woman who had been forced to choose between her dignity and her career. Amanda's office felt colder than usual as she closed the door behind us. Trevor has already contacted Jeffrey, she said, without preamble. The board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning at 9. You're expected to attend. I'll be there, I said, surprised by my own steadiness. Barry. Amanda hesitated, her professional mask slipping slightly. What you did was unprecedented. I can't protect you from the fallout. I understand, I replied. I don't expect you to. As I left her office, my phone buzzed with an official email confirming the board meeting. The subject line read simply, Disciplinary Review. My hands finally began to shake as the adrenaline ebbed, replaced by the stark reality of what tomorrow might bring. Back at my desk, Rachel was waiting. "Are you completely insane?" she whispered fiercely. "You just committed career suicide." Maybe I acknowledged. But I couldn't stay silent anymore. "What are you going to do about the board meeting?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "I'm going to tell them exactly what I told Trevor, with evidence." As word spread throughout the office, women began coming to my desk one by one, some openly, others under the pretense of work discussions. Sarah from accounting, Kate from graphic design, Alicia from customer service. Each shared their own Trevor story. Each offered to stand with me at the meeting. By the end of the day, my evidence file had grown substantially, and I was no longer standing alone. As I packed up my things, uncertain if I'd be returning on Monday, my computer pinged with one last email from an unexpected source. Elaine Werner, the only female board member, wanted to meet me for coffee before tomorrow's meeting. I left the office that evening, with equal measures of dread and determination. The board meeting would determine more than just my fate at Ridgeway. It would reveal whether the company's stated values meant anything at all. I barely slept that night. My mind raced through every possible scenario for the board meeting, most ending with me being fired, some worse. By morning, I had rehearsed my statement countless times, reviewed my documentation until I could recite incidents by date and time, and tried to prepare myself emotionally for what was coming. Rachel called around 7. "I rallied some troops," she said without preamble. "Sarah, Diana, and Sophia have all agreed to attend the meeting if needed. They're terrified, but they'll be there." "Sophia too?" I asked, surprised the intern would risk her position. She said, and I quote, "If Barry can put her whole career on the line for me after knowing me for 3 days, I can at least show up to tell the truth." Tears pricked my eyes. "Thank you, Rachel, for everything. Just remember, no matter what happens today, you did the right thing," she said firmly, "and you're not alone." I met Elaine for coffee at 8, an hour before the meeting. The small cafe across from Ridgeway was quiet. Business professionals not yet arrived for their morning caffeine. Elaine was already seated in a corner booth when I arrived, elegant in a charcoal suit, her silver hair cut in a precise bob. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as I sat down. Her expression was unreadable professional. "Of course," I replied, trying to mask my nervousness. "Though I'm surprised you wanted to." Elaine studied me for a moment. "I've been on the board for 8 years, she said finally. "The only woman in a room of 12 men. I know something about difficult conversations." "Am I walking into an execution?" I asked directly. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Jeffrey certainly wants it to be. He spent 3 hours on the phone with board members yesterday afternoon." My heart sank. "So it's decided already?" "Not entirely," Elaine said carefully. "Some members have concerns about potential liability. Others are genuinely disturbed by the allegations, if true. Jeffrey has considerable influence, but he's not omnipotent." "What should I expect?" "They'll try to intimidate you," she said frankly. "The room, the formality, the questioning. They'll attempt to frame this as insubordination, unprofessional behavior, creating workplace discord. They'll question your motives and your stability." I nodded, having expected as much. "My advice," Elaine continued, "stick to facts, dates, times, specific behaviors. No emotions, no generalizations. Present your evidence methodically. And if you have witnesses willing to speak, that would significantly strengthen your position." "I do," I confirmed. 3 women are prepared to testify about their experiences." Something flickered in Elaine's eyes. Maybe approval, maybe surprise. "Good," she said simply. "That changes the equation considerably." At 9 o'clock sharp, I entered the executive boardroom on the top floor. The space was intimidating by design, with floor-to-ceiling windows, a massive mahogany table, and leather chairs, occupied by 11 men and Elaine. Jeffrey sat at one end glowering, while Trevor was conspicuously absent. The company president, William Montgomery, a man I'd rarely interacted with, sat at the head of the table. "Miss Harrison," he said formally, "please take a seat. We've called this meeting to address the incident that occurred yesterday afternoon in the employee break room." I sat in the single chair positioned to face the entire board, placed my folder of documentation on the table, and took a deep breath. Before we begin, I said I'd like to clarify that what happened yesterday wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of 6 months of documented harassment by Trevor Parker against multiple female employees. Jeffrey immediately interjected. "This is preposterous. My nephew is a respected director who has been nothing but professional. Miss Harrison has clearly manufactured these allegations out of professional jealousy." William raised a hand. "We'll get to all perspectives, Jeffrey. For now, let's hear Miss Harrison out." For the next 30 minutes, I presented my evidence methodically, just as Elaine had advised. I detailed specific incidents with dates, times, and locations. I explained the pattern of escalation from inappropriate comments to unwanted touching, to explicit quid pro quo propositions. I described the culture of fear that prevented women from reporting, especially given Trevor's relationship to Jeffrey. "These are the statements I've collected," I said, sliding copies of my documentation to each board member. 14 women have reported incidents to me. 3 of those women are waiting outside, prepared to testify to their experiences firsthand if you wish to hear them. A murmur ran through the board. This clearly wasn't what they had expected. "This is hearsay and gossip," Jeffrey insisted, though I noticed he hadn't touched the documentation in front of him. "Trevor has an exemplary record." With all due respect, I countered. "Trevor has been with the company less than a year, in a position created specifically for him, with no prior experience in marketing or client relations. His exemplary record exists because complaints against him have been systematically ignored or suppressed." "That's a serious accusation," William said, frowning. "It is," I agreed. "And I've included evidence of that as well." Page 12 contains my email exchange with HR following my formal complaint in February, where I was told no action could be taken without concrete evidence. Page 15 shows a similar response to Diana's complaint, in April. Elaine spoke for the first time. "I'd like to hear from these witnesses directly." Despite Jeffrey's protests, William agreed. One by one, Sarah, Diana, and finally Sophia entered the room. Each shared their experience briefly but powerfully. Sarah described being cornered in the conference room after hours. Diana detailed the implicit threat to her career when she refused Trevor's advances. Sophia, visibly nervous but determined, recounted the supply closet incident from just the day before. When they finished, the mood in the room had shifted perceptibly. Several board members were frowning, reviewing the documentation with new interest. Even William looked troubled. "I think we should hear from Trevor as well," he said finally. Trevor entered looking confident, dressed impeccably in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. He took the seat I vacated, his expression, a perfect mask of wounded professionalism. "These accusations are not only false but malicious," he began smoothly. "Miss Harrison has created a hostile work environment with her unfounded allegations. She's manipulated junior staff into supporting her narrative out of some vendetta against me, possibly due to my relationship with Jeffrey, possibly due to her own failure to advance further in the company." He continued in this vein, painting himself as the victim of a coordinated attack. He suggested I was unstable, that the women supporting me were confused or misinterpreting innocent interactions. He implied that Sophia, as a new intern, was particularly susceptible to influence and might be seeking attention. As his character assassination progressed, I noticed something interesting. The more Trevor spoke, the more skeptical some board members appeared. His explanation for why 14 separate women would fabricate similar stories strained credibility, even for those inclined to support him. When the testimonies concluded, William asked both Trevor and me to wait outside while the board deliberated. The hallway was painfully quiet as we sat on opposite ends of a bench, neither acknowledging the other. 15 minutes stretched to 30, then an hour. Finally, Amanda emerged to escort us back in. William's expression was grave as we retook our seats. "This has been a difficult situation to evaluate," he began. "On one hand, we have serious allegations that, if true, represent a significant liability for the company. On the other, we have a valued employee's reputation at stake. My heart sank. This sounded like the preamble to dismissing everything. After reviewing the evidence and testimony, William continued, "The board has decided that Mr. Parker will be placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation by an external firm. During this time, he will not be permitted on company premises or to contact any Ridgeway employees." Jeffrey stood abruptly. "This is outrageous. You're taking the word of a junior employee and an intern over a director, over my nephew." "We're conducting a proper investigation," Jeffrey William replied firmly. "That's all. If Trevor is cleared, he'll be reinstated with full apologies." "And what about her?" Jeffrey demanded, jabbing a finger toward me. "She publicly defamed my nephew in front of the entire office." William turned to me. "Miss Harrison, while we appreciate you bringing these concerns forward, the manner in which you did so was inappropriate. Company policy clearly outlines the proper channels for harassment complaints." "Channels I used repeatedly. Without result," I interjected. "Nevertheless," William continued, "public confrontations are not acceptable in our workplace. We expect all employees to maintain professionalism, especially during difficult situations." It was a reprimand, though milder than I'd expected. However, William added, "Pending the investigation results, no disciplinary action will be taken against you at this time. You may return to your regular duties while the investigation proceeds." Trevor stood his composed facade, cracking. "This is a joke," he snapped. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." As he stormed out, Jeffrey fixed me with a cold stare. "You've made a serious mistake today," he said quietly. "This isn't over." The meeting concluded, and I walked out in a daze, unsure whether to feel relieved or terrified. I hadn't been fired, but Jeffrey's threat hung in the air. Trevor was on leave, but only temporarily. The investigation could still clear him, especially if women were too frightened to speak to the external investigators. Back on our floor, the atmosphere was strange. Some colleagues avoided eye contact, clearly uncomfortable with the disruption to workplace hierarchy. Others offered subtle nods of support or whispered thanks as they passed my desk. A small group gathered around Rachel's station, trading theories about what had happened in the board meeting. The next 2 weeks were a strange limbo. The external investigators arrived, setting up in a conference room and conducting interviews with numerous employees. Women I'd never spoken to approached me privately to share their own Trevor stories, some going back to his very first week. The support was heartening, but Jeffrey's cold glares whenever we crossed paths reminded me that the power dynamics hadn't fundamentally changed. Office alliances shifted visibly. Those aligned with Jeffrey and Trevor kept their distance, their whispered conversations stopping abruptly when I approached. Others, particularly women, and a few male allies like Michael, became more openly supportive. The invisible lines dividing the workplace became increasingly apparent. Through it all, I continued my work, focusing on clients and campaigns with a determination bordering on obsession. If my career at Ridgeway was indeed ending, I wanted to leave with my professional reputation intact. Every presentation was meticulously prepared, every email carefully crafted, knowing that any mistake would be magnified under the current scrutiny. When the investigators finally completed their work, the entire office held its collective breath, waiting for the outcome that would determine not just Trevor's fate, but the message the company was sending about whose safety and dignity truly mattered. The investigation took exactly 14 business days. 14 days of sidelong glances in the hallway, of whispered conversations that stopped when I approached, of wondering whether I still had a career. Through it all, I maintained a facade of calm professionalism, though inside I fluctuated between panic and a strange, detached acceptance. On the 15th day, the results were announced. Not in a company-wide email or public statement, but in a series of closed-door meetings that sent ripples of speculation throughout the office. I was called to William's office at 3 in the afternoon. When I arrived, Amanda from HR was already there, along with Elaine from the board, and an unfamiliar woman who introduced herself as the lead investigator. William gestured for me to sit, his expression unreadable. Miss Harrison, he began formally, the investigation into the allegations against Trevor Parker has concluded. After interviewing 27 employees and reviewing all available evidence, the investigators have substantiated the majority of the claims. My breath caught. I had expected them to find ways to dismiss or minimize what had happened. Trevor's employment with Ridgeway has been terminated effective immediately, William continued. He will receive no severance package, and a non-disclosure agreement has been negotiated as part of his separation. Relief washed over me, but William wasn't finished. Additionally, the investigation revealed significant failures in our reporting structures and response protocols. Jeffrey Parker has been removed from his oversight of the HR department and will be required to complete comprehensive harassment training. He remains VP of Client Services, but with modified responsibilities. This was more than I had dared hope for, though still less than complete justice. Jeffrey would face consequences, but retain his position and power. Finally, William said, shifting uncomfortably, the board recognizes that your attempts to report these issues through proper channels were inadequately addressed. While your public confrontation wasn't the ideal approach, we acknowledge that you felt it was your only remaining option. The investigator spoke up. Miss Harrison, 20 of the 27 employees interviewed, specifically mentioned your advocacy for women in the office. Your documentation was instrumental in establishing the pattern of behavior. William cleared his throat. To that end, we'd like to offer you a new position, he said. Ridgeway is establishing a workplace culture committee to review and overhaul our policies and reporting procedures. We'd like you to lead it, reporting directly to the board, rather than through traditional management channels. It was a promotion, though, an unconventional one. More importantly, it was a structural change that might actually help prevent similar situations in the future. I'll need time to consider, I said, not wanting to appear too eager or too dismissive. Of course, William nodded. Take the weekend. We can discuss details on Monday. As news spread through the office, the reactions were mixed, but trending positive. Many women expressed relief and gratitude, some tearfully. A few of Trevor's allies were noticeably bitter, suggesting I had orchestrated a witch hunt. Jeffrey maintained a cold professionalism toward me, the threat in his eyes whenever we crossed paths, making it clear he considered me an enemy. The first few weeks after the investigation were the hardest. There was an awkwardness in many interactions, as though colleagues weren't sure how to behave in this new landscape. Some avoided discussing what had happened entirely, while others wanted to rehash every detail. I found myself simultaneously celebrated as a hero and isolated as a troublemaker, depending on who I was talking to. Gradually, a new normal emerged. I accepted the position leading the Workplace Culture Committee, assembling a diverse team, including Rachel, Michael, and surprisingly Amanda from HR, who seemed genuinely committed to improving the systems that had failed under her watch. Elaine became an unexpected mentor, meeting me for coffee every few weeks, to offer guidance on navigating board politics and implementing meaningful change. What you did took courage, she told me during one such meeting, but creating lasting change takes persistence and strategy. The real work is just beginning. She was right. We faced resistance at every turn, especially from those who benefited from the old power structures. Policy drafts were returned with concerns about implementation. Budget requests for training programs were questioned. Proposed changes to reporting procedures were labeled excessive. But we also found allies in surprising places. Several male executives, sobered by the realization of what had been happening under their watch, became advocates for our work. Younger employees, less entrenched in the old culture, embraced the changes enthusiastically. Even some of Jeffrey's longtime colleagues began distancing themselves from him, perhaps sensing a shift in the company's power dynamics. 6 months after the confrontation, we launched a completely revamped harassment policy, with anonymous reporting options, clear investigation timelines, and protection against retaliation built into every step. We instituted mandatory training for all employees with additional modules for managers. Most importantly, we established a diversity committee with actual authority to review promotion decisions and hiring practices. These structural changes mattered, but the personal healing was equally important. The women who had been targeted by Trevor formed an informal support network that evolved into regular lunch gatherings. What began as a space to process trauma became a powerful professional network, with members advocating for each other's ideas, in meetings, celebrating promotions, and providing advice on career advancement. For me personally, the journey of recovery was complicated. There were nights I woke in a cold sweat replaying the confrontation or the board meeting, second-guessing every decision. There were days when Jeffrey's cold stare in the hallway sent anxiety coursing through me. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in workplace trauma learning techniques to manage the stress and recognize the difference between justified caution and paralyzing fear. Gradually, I reclaimed my confidence. With each successful policy implementation, each positive feedback from employees, each small shift in the company culture, my sense of purpose strengthened. I had taken an enormous risk, but it had created an opportunity for meaningful change that extended beyond just removing one harasser. A year after the confrontation, Ridgeway looked noticeably different. Our executive team had diversified with 3 new female vice presidents. Our recruitment materials emphasized our commitment to a safe, respectful workplace. Our internal promotion statistics showed promising trends toward greater equity. Jeffrey eventually left for another company, unable or unwilling to adapt to the new culture. His departure marked the final chapter in the Trevor saga, removing the last significant defender of the old ways. The most meaningful moment came unexpectedly when Sophia sought me out after completing her internship and accepting a full-time position with the company. "I want you to know something," she said, her confidence visibly grown from the nervous intern I'd first met. When Trevor cornered me that day, I thought that was just how things worked in the corporate world. That success meant enduring that kind of behavior. You showed me it doesn't have to be that way, that we deserve better. Her words crystallized the most important lesson from this entire experience. Workplace cultures don't change by themselves. Policies on paper mean nothing without enforcement. Speaking up carries risks, but silence guarantees that nothing will improve. And most importantly, when we stand together, even the untouchable can be held accountable. The path I chose was difficult and frightening. I risked my career, my reputation, and my financial security. But when I look at Ridgeway today, at the women navigating their careers, without the fear that dominated, before I know I would make the same choice again. If you're watching this and facing a similar situation, remember that you're not alone, even when it feels that way. Document everything. Find allies where you can. Use official channels first, but don't stop there if they fail you. Your safety and dignity matter more than any job. Have you ever stood up against workplace harassment or witnessed someone else do so? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might give someone else the courage they need. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others who might be facing similar challenges. Remember that change begins with one person willing to speak the truth, even when it's difficult. Thank you for listening to my story.